This is TRAXXfm, and it's time for Face to Face with your host, speaking to today's panelists. Face to Face, exclusively on TRAXXfm.
Welcome to this week's edition of Face to Face on TRAXXfm's Momentum. Yeah, it is the edition dated Thursday, October 28th, 2021. Fast calling it a wrap, almost, to the 10th month of the year. Yeah, of course, we are all gearing up for Budget 2022. So, joining me on Face to Face today, I have with me a general partner from Scaleup Malaysia, Sarma, joins me for the discussion today. Thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Kang, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. A key focus for our discussion today, right, which is basically a key focus of our country's GDP, right? 41% of Malaysia's GDP is contributed by SMEs, right? Small and medium enterprises play this vital role in Malaysia. And this year, despite, of course, all the challenges, the ups and downs, the U-turns that we faced in the past year and a half, right? SMEs in Malaysia continue to endure, and also, to some extent, with the support and assistance from the government. Really depends on which SME spectrum that we're talking about, right? In fact, let's start with that. How much has the overall support and assistance helped the SMEs, and in which ways maybe that some SMEs or some portions of it just have not thrived?
Hi, Kang, I think that's a great question. I love your framing, right? Because obviously, not every SME has responded to the pandemic in the same way. But I do actually think the government has done a lot for SMEs and startups during the pandemic. We saw these Penjana, Pemakasa Plus, the Pemulis relief efforts, and all these things that they come across. And some of these are digitalization grants, some of these are financial options with entities like Malaysian Debt Ventures. There are investment support from Dana Penjana. More recently, we saw the loan moratorium. Earlier on, we had the wage subsidies. And I think these have helped keep a lot of businesses afloat. But I do agree with you with the premise that some companies really suffered because of the nature of their business, but some actually were able to thrive. And there's another class of companies who figured out how to pivot their business and find new revenue streams.
But that's the thing, isn't it? We talk about SMEs as a whole, as they contribute so much to the country's GDP and the economy overall, yet it is such a wide, broad spectrum. I think that's where the challenge is, isn't it? In terms of, in this case, let's say we're talking about the budget and allocation per se. I mean, how do you, make sure that besides the other components of the budget beyond SMEs, it already is quite a very, in fact, tough challenge to put it all together. Yeah, any budget, it's tough, but Malaysia's budget in particular, coming at this time, 19 months post-pandemic or whatever you want to call it, is super, super challenging, isn't it? So
yeah.
I know it's a broad spectrum that we're talking about, so then maybe you can help me pinpoint in some areas as well. For example, you said, there were some SMEs that really did pivot and even benefited from the pandemic, yet there were so many that actually went out of business, went bust, yeah? So how soon do you see SMEs overall, right, bouncing back and perhaps better than before? And I guess more importantly, Aaron, is how can each portion of the SME spectrum actually benefit or bounce back?
Yeah, I think I appreciate the nuanced approach in which you're asking the question, because it's true, right? We've seen companies in the digital space, they've done really, really well.
Right.
First of all, there's more adoption of digital services. Other SMEs and other businesses are more open to new solutions. So we've seen a huge shift in that regard. We've seen F&B entities, right, figure out that, you know what, I'm going to do delivery more, which meant maybe changing business models, maybe changing cost structures, and that's kind of how they kind of survived, right? And maybe that's really how they kind of moved through the last couple of years. So, but of course, some people have had an especially difficult time if you're in the beauty space or in more traditional retail, and you could not convert to e-commerce. So I think certainly there's different kinds of SMEs, and that's really unfortunate. Those who could not survive didn't make it through, but those that did make it through, I think that's really interesting to see how they've been able to kind of survive in the new normal. To me, the real question is how permanent is this new post-pandemic reality, and whether or not And I think that's where some of the changes to the resistance we're seeing really is. A lot of SMEs are sitting on their hands and saying, I'm just going to wait this out. Things will come back to normal soon. And when it doesn't happen, that's where we see them go bust. And then some of them are, investing heavily, and they are doing pretty well now. So I think the quicker people realize that this new normal will probably stay for the foreseeable future and make the changes to the business, the more these companies will survive into the next year or so.
Right, that's the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, you can't just you cannot take the approach that we want things to be back pre-pandemic. There's no such thing. Right, the world has moved on. We know that certain areas has even become even more prominent in terms of what we already knew prior to the pandemic that was going to shape the future of the world. I mean, like technology, digitization, and things like that. So the pandemic has certainly been the major push towards the acceleration, towards those aspects. So that's the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, if you're an SME or any micro enterprise of sort, if you're holding on to something, a business model, or in fact, like maybe like a business that is in the sunset phase, you got to let go, isn't it? That really truly is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing is consumer mindsets have changed. Like I was just thinking about the other day, I was thinking, there are movies in the cinema, right? And I said, should I go and watch the movie in the cinema? And I was thinking, wait a minute, if I wait a couple of months, it's going to come to my Netflix or my Amazon Prime or somewhere.
Right.
And I can very well, I figured out how to make good popcorn in my house now. So, why do I have to go to the cinema anymore?
That's
so
right.
I think consumer mindsets are changing. When I can get my favorite food delivered to my house, and in the last year, I've made my house pretty beautiful when we hang out. I've done more housework than I've done in the last 10 years. The calculus for the average consumer has changed. So the behaviors are different. So SMEs to realize that some of these behaviors may never go back to where it was before.
Now I want to touch base on how best can we bridge the gap, and that's always honestly, because I've been doing budget related topics for many years here on behalf of TRAXXfm, right? And it always is the gap between the SMEs to the agency, for example, that is in charge of overseeing, coordinating efforts between the government, for example, and the SMEs per se. But before that, right, we're talking about change and really accepting the fact that some areas of business industries are best to, in a way, let go, right? But are there any other keys they can share with us that perhaps SMEs in Malaysia should or would consider to change, making them more high value and so on?
Yeah, I think, one thing I've learned over the last couple of years working at SMEs and startups is that we've got some really, really high-quality entrepreneurs. They're resourceful, they're hardworking, they've got really good ideas. And I think what they need to think about to really consider changing, as you say, to make it high value, is firstly, they need to figure out how they can innovate and build an asset using technology. We've got a company we're working with now who figure out how to do like a cloud kitchen effectively, right? And they figure out how to optimize making sushi and distributing it to people, right? And so really figuring out how to build an asset using technology on existing business, there are huge opportunities there. The other thing is to really find talent who have new skills, right? Digital skills. I think that's really important. And maybe we'll talk about that later as we unpack what the budget could be about. Really having people with new digital talent, I think it's really important to kind of develop this technology asset within every SME. And the other thing is the pandemic has shown us that we can build cross-border businesses from the comfort of our home pretty easily. And I think that's the true opportunity here. We see lots of really creative Malaysians who have built really good products. And we're talking about people who are what we call the EU Sahawan kind of people who build skincare products or beauty products from their homes in their villages or out of KL, and they're selling it to the network. And these products will actually be sent out and distributed around the region, if not the world, and that technology can actually help them do that. Right? So I think that's really the opportunity.
Now, naturally, the pandemic has not just wiped out business per se, but along those lines, of course, left people without jobs and so on, right? As these companies either have gone bust, like you were saying, or, people have been let go from their positions within permanent positions, yeah? And, of course, the idea is to get the labor force on the whole, right? People to change their skills, perhaps maybe to accommodate what is being offered. What is your opinion on this? Because people do have their core personal skills as well, right? Do we urge everybody to relook into that and yet at the same time also make sure that, you do get tech savvy. That's very important, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, to me, this is probably one of the most critical things we need to address as a nation moving forward, which is the skill sets of our workforce, right? I've seen some statistics that says that, in 8 years, or 2030, 800 million jobs around the world will be displaced by automation, right? And if we don't recognize that we need to help our workforce upskill and reskill in today, right, in the immediate future, we're going to be left behind in a couple of years. And our regional competitors are going to overtake us, and our SMEs are going to suffer because they won't be able to get the right talent. And so I think this is really, really critical that we do this. And so from a nationwide standpoint or a government standpoint, this needs to be addressed. But as an individual in the workforce, everybody needs to take the responsibility to learn new skills. I know I've learned new skills over the last year or so in things like digital marketing, and some like coding, and understanding how to work with different kinds of teams. And I think everybody needs to realize that this is your education did not stop when you left SPM or university. There are new skills you need to pick up now, in AI, in agile development, coding, learning how to work with big tech teams. I think it's really important. And there are lots of great organizations out there that people can leverage, like General Assembly, who's a partner of ours in Scaleup, Malaysia, Asia Academy, 42KL, Next Academy, Ford School up in Penang. These are private sector organizations helping to upskill and reskill people. MDAC has been flying this flag for quite some time to help the riot kind of upskill. And so I think if everybody realizes that this is a problem, of course the government needs to set policy, but as individuals in the workforce, we can take responsibility and do this too.
Yeah, and it's very important as individuals to actually be proactive to do all of this and not having to be pushed. I mean, it's just a key part of personal development overall. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go for a short break. I'm going to put you on hold for about 20 seconds. Grab a sip of water. And when we come back, more with Aaron Sarma, General Manager of Scaleup Malaysia, General Partner, Scaleup Malaysia. Hear more on gearing up for Budget 2022 on Face to Face.
Face to Face, we'll be back right after this. Stay tuned to know more about today's topic exclusively on TRAXXfm.
Unwind from the traffic in Kuala Lumpur.
Feast your ears to soothing music on your favorite station.
TRAXXfm 90.3 Kuala Lumpur.
Welcome back to Face for the edition dated Thursday, 28th October 2021, as we're gearing up for the official unveiling and presentation of Budget 2022 in Parliament. That's happening tomorrow, right? Here with me to talk about this, Aaron Sarma, General Partner at Scaleup Malaysia, talking about SMEs. Now, they play a vital role in Malaysia in 2020 itself. It's estimated that SMEs in Malaysia contributed 41% to the overall country's GDP, and a key focus always on any budget of the year. With Budget 2022 coming up, Aaron, what is, in your opinion, this is such a big, broad question, okay, but it's on my list. Is there more that can be done, and in what aspects to revive the SMEs in Malaysia?
I think if the question is there more we can do? Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir here that we should definitely do a lot more to help the SMEs. And you said it right, it's 40% of the GDP of the country. 90% of all businesses are, in fact, SMEs. And I think the immediate focus for me and for the companies we work with, Scaleup Malaysia, as well as for SMEs in general, is just to focus on a couple of things, right? The first issue is that I think a lot of SMEs and startups are seeing their cash reserves depleted because of a sharp drop in revenue, right? Or, not a sharp drop in revenue, a need to innovate or deploy capital to find new technology solutions to kind of meet the needs of the last year and a half. And so having some way to replenish that coffer is important as well. A lot of SMEs also are left behind in the digital race. I mean, great that a lot of them have figured out how to use things like Grab and Foodpanda and air delivery and whatnot. But I think what's really, really important is to kind of take the next step, right, to help them stay competitive and adopt the right kind of innovation. And as we mentioned just now in the conversation, right, the talent gap is still extremely substantial. A lot of SMEs, especially those who are trying to adopt new skills, are always saying that I can't find the right people, I can't find the right talent. So really, the talent gap is something that really needs to be addressed. So I think these are a couple of areas that definitely can be improved upon in the budget 2022.
Right, and in terms of you mentioned the gap, of course, between the people with the right skills and what is necessary for a particular business, right? What about a gap between the SMEs and also the various agencies, right? In terms of maybe offering expertise from a technical perspective, maybe financial aid, incentive packages and things like that. I feel that obviously a large part of it should already have been addressed with this pandemic in the past 19 months, right? And that's actually on accessing the technology platforms. We talk about Zoom, and then beyond, plus, Google Meets, and the whole works, yeah? That really enable closer, tighter, and more, and yet personal communication between, say, a government agency and a relevant SME per se, right? In terms of that communication, because that's where I think traditionally it's really been a gap that's needed to be addressed. Yeah, I think any other areas you see that this communication can be tighter.
Yeah, I think Well, I will give credit to some of the agencies in the government. They've done a really good job in doing that private sector and public sector partnerships. We've kind of worked with them. We work, for example, pretty closely with the Malaysian Magic, which is an agency that works on startup capacity building. We also work with Technology Park Malaysia quite a bit. And so that's been really encouraging that they're working with private sectors, startups, I think, and private sector organizations like ourselves. But I think the major challenge that we really see is that there are just too many agencies out there. So even though there's lots of messaging coming out, it can be very confusing for the average SME to know where to go, where to get the information I want. And in fact, if you ask a man on the street or an SME on the street what benefits are there, a lot of them won't even know. And I think that's an issue, right? So the government has done a really good job announcing all these little benefits, but if nobody knows how to take advantage of them, how to benefit from it, that's a real issue. And so I think one is having one concise place for everybody to see all this information, having a simple way for people to understand how to get these benefits, and then having a singular point of contact. I think that's really key.
That's the thing, isn't it? I do see some examples, some specific examples, right, through the conversations I've had, like people, guests like you, where, it does address a particular segment of an industry or SME, micro SMEs, in fact, at one point of the show, right? But yeah, though that is just one example. I mean, that's where we need to see more of, right? An actual, like localized contact point. Yes, we spoke about how online access is so much better these days. But where it is that a personal contact point can be at, for example, a community centers and so on. That's going to be very important. Yeah. So I think those need to be spelled out more in general, right? And clearer and literally spelled out more in, I don't know, budget addendums. I don't know how they would do it formally, but you know what I mean. So there's the big budget plan, and then it should be actually more spelled out per se. Yeah. Speaking of budget itself, what would you like to see included in budget 2022? So
I think watching the budget has been like a little bit of a pastime thing that I've done over the last few years. So I'm kind of like a nerd around these issues these days. It tells you how far things have changed over the last couple of years. And in fact, I've also written 2 articles that are out today on Digital News Agent and Astro Awani about my aspirations for the budget, right? But I think if I can sum it up in 3 main things, and we've kind of talked about it this morning as well. Number one, I think we need to help SMEs and startups show cash flow through more grants, loan opportunities, investment opportunities. I think these are things that are really important. Obviously, every single one of these different instruments have rules and expectations, and I think that the key is to give people an opportunity to take advantage of these benefits from the government, right? And we've seen in the past how they help companies. I also am recommending that maybe we consider reducing the SME tax rate from 70% to 10%. This is just in the idea of for companies who've had good cash flow over the last couple of years and have seen their coffers go to zero or close to zero over the last year and a half, give them an opportunity to replenish those coffers, because right now we have another lockdown. That's it. I think a lot of companies are going to have a really, really tough time. And so I think giving that opportunity to these companies to replenish their reserves would be really, really important. Number 2, I think, is to invest in digitization for SMEs. We need to go further. We've done a really good job, and by necessity, people have adopted delivery services and POS services and accounting software. Great. I'm really encouraged by this. But I think we can go further in things like 4IR solutions like AI automation and data services, which I think will be really important to help keep our SMEs in the cutting edge. And then third one is what we've been talking about quite a bit today, actually. We need to invest a lot more in upskilling and reskilling the workforce, and we talked about it earlier. But I also like to say, and this is not very specific to SMEs today, but definitely the SMEs who are going to come, right? I like to see coding education for children. There's a stat I saw that really scared me. 65% of children entering primary school education today will be in careers that don't exist yet.
Yep.
And yet, coding is not a required study in all our schools today. And I think that's really important that we teach our kids these digital skills so that when they enter the workforce, they are ready to compete with the market around the world. I think it's really key.
Yeah, interesting point. And I think that just has to, this falls under this umbrella of making sure that we're each independently competent. I think that is the way the world has been shaping up, yeah? And if anything, that's what we've learned from the COVID pandemic is that, isn't it? And, the more competent you are, the more multi-skilled that a person is, the more he or she is going to be able to last through anything, such as what we've had to experience.
That will create even better businesses, right? Like
and
the better entrepreneurs, better companies. It's all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it's just everybody being able to perform better overall. Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting conversation. Thank you so much. Wrapping up the session with you today. Anything else? Any last final messages for our listeners today?
I guess speaking to the listeners and to the average person who, in the public, right? I think here's what I like to end on, right? I think we all want Malaysian SMEs and startups to succeed. And I've dedicated this phase of my career to helping startups get to the next stage of growth. Right? We can all do our part, right? I think Malaysians should focus on buying Malaysian and supporting local businesses. Buy Malaysian products. I think we've got some of the best entrepreneurs in the world in Malaysia. But they can only really succeed if we as a people have pride in our own entrepreneurs and back them to the success that we can achieve.
Right. Good one. Thank you so much. And thanks for being with us today on Face to Face. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. See you soon.
Aaron Sarma, General Partner at Scaleup Malaysia, here with us as we gear up for Budget 2022. That wraps up this week's Face to Face. Much more headed your way on the rest of today's momentum. My name is Kong Yu. I'll be keeping company till 2 p.m., so keep it tuned right here on Trax.